So welcome to the August general membership meeting of the Culver City Democratic Club. Tonight's theme is stopping the Republican recall. And we have with us for the first hour, Betty Yee from the State Party and Mary Ellen Early from the County Party. They're both going to talk about why this is important and what we can do to help. And hopefully there will also be time for your questions. Without further ado, I'll hand the floor over to State Controller Betty Yee, who is also Vice Chair of the Democratic Party. Thank you for spending time with us tonight.
Of course, thank you so much. Good evening, Democrats, and really happy to spend some time with you. Thank you for opening up the meeting with the sole focus that we have for the next period of weeks, and that is to defeat and stop the Republican recall. And very happy that I'm joined here by Mary Ellen Early. Thank you for the time spent. And as you can imagine, my time each night is to speak to as many Democrats as possible about turning out the vote. This is a turnout election. We're 34 days out. Ballots will drop within the next week. And we know that what's at stake. Some of you articulated that at the beginning of this call. And that is, really about, just everything that Gavin Newsom, that Democrats have fought so hard for, really on the line when we think about, the alternative. But really, I'm here to just say one simple thing, and that is, there's only one message about this recall, and it's very simple, and it's to vote no on this recall. And there's been some confusion about how best to educate voters about the ballot. For example, what to do on question 2. And frankly, question 2 is about the list of alternative candidates. And I just want to be very, very clear about what our mission is as Democrats. We intend to defeat this recall on question 1, which is to vote no, which will mean that question 2 will be irrelevant. But that is possible, and we will be victorious if we turn out every Democratic vote that we can really try to persuade. And this is our work between now and September 14th. As I said, ballots will hit within the next week, and we really hope to persuade voters to fill those ballots out early. No on question 1, so it's really vote no and go. No on question 1, leave question 2 blank. Because really, when you think about it, if we are supporting our governor, if we are all in for Gavin Newsom, that means question 2 is irrelevant. It is about defeating this recall. And what's at stake is not just, just some of the things that we know we've been able to accomplish in spite of the pandemic. And yes, it is about having steady leadership. I know this governor has, over the past 17 months, every single day, he wakes up to think about what more can I do to keep Californians healthy and safe. And that includes our children in our schools. It includes our, most vulnerable within our communities. It includes, our undocumented communities, our communities of color who have been bearing, the brunt of the COVID impacts. And so this is not just about COVID, but also about everything else that this governor has provided leadership on. It is his work on criminal justice reform. It is his only offense really is that he's been working to create a California for all, which means that this has taken time. He has made tremendous strides because a California for all means that we have to reverse course in terms of what history has dealt us as far as the lack of equity in our underserved communities and our communities of color. And he has begun to just make tremendous strides in that arena. We are going to be phone banking. We are going to be doing door-to-door canvassing as safely as possible. This is a turnout election, which means that we need to turn out every single vote. I know that between the campaign and the party, we are especially going to be looking at protecting the vote as well. This is really a prelude to what 2022 can look like. We know that this is a Republican fueled recall, and I know some people have an issue with calling it that. But when you have the RNC who is just right smack in the middle of this recall. When you have so many across this country who are looking at how we're going to take down California and the values that we uphold, particularly as Democrats, when we look at how all of the voting rights and protections are being dismantled across this country, and this is the Republican attack on California, is to see whether they can grab the highest office in the bluest state in the country through a recall. This is very much a Republican recall that we have to stop. And so in the next period of days and weeks leading up to the ultimate election day, the campaign will as well. You'll hear definitely more radio ads. You're already seeing TV spots, and that's the campaign. Social media kits. That really what we know as Democrats, how we win elections, how we are victorious is the ground game. And this is true time and time again. The ground efforts that are going to be taking place across the state, especially phoning and walking. And so this is really about what each of us can do in terms of connecting within our respective communities, our respective worlds, our families, our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers, to ensure that they are voting no on this recall. In addition, over the next 5 weeks, the officers of the California Democratic Party will be doing even more outreach with county committees, our Democratic clubs, our grassroots leaders, to ensure that you have the support you need to get the word out. And so we have an organizing director in Lizzie Habor with the party, and we have been activating her. We have organizing managers who are on board who are helping her in that effort. But bottom line, we just need to get California Democrats to vote no and to turn their ballot in. If we do that, we win. So, I just want to say this is going to be an all hands on deck effort. Even when we have the executive board meeting later on in August, we will have actions during the e-board meeting. We are going to end the e-board meeting with every caucus chair, every standing committee chair taking on 2 phone banks. There will be accountability associated with it, to where we are going to be sure that everybody is serious about this. This is the sole focus of Democrats between now and September 14th. And I can say that we know how to win this. We know how to win this. But part of this is also just eliminating the confusion. No on question 1, turn your ballot in. And question 2 is irrelevant. Find the next Democrat to vote. No on question 1, turn their ballot in, make sure they turn their ballot in, and question 2 is irrelevant. So this is what we need to do. This is the mission of our time. It has huge implications for this country. It has huge implications for 2022. And I know that when we get back to our ground game, which is where I started as an activist years and years ago, decades ago, the way that I've run my campaigns on the ground, this is what is going to win this election. And so I was just with the governor at a rally on Saturday, on another couple of virtual events the last couple of days. We're leaving to him to talk about what's at stake in this election. He is very sanguine about how this is being covered by our opponents, and so he will be giving voice to that. We're giving voice to what Gavin Newsom stands for, what Democrats stand for, and why if we are to not vote no on this recall, we are looking at California going backwards. We're looking at the stripping of women's reproductive health rights. We're looking at all of the criminal justice reform efforts, looking at all of the issues around how we are providing assistance to our undocumented communities, to our communities of color, all of that taking a step back. And more importantly, this has been the toughest 17 months for many of us. And to have that steady leadership where every day he has been visible, he has been present, he's been accountable. He's made mistakes, he's admitted, but he has been there. And if we look at other governors that are trying to deal with this pandemic across this country, I shudder to think what kind of leadership could take the place of someone who has just been in the moment and dealing with this with steady leadership for the past 17 months to ensure that each and every one of us and our families and our loved ones are healthy and safe. So again, vote no, turn in your ballot, nothing more, nothing less. So let's get this done, Democrats. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer questions.
So if anyone does have a question, please raise your Zoom hand and I'll try to call on you in the order that those come up. Okay, great. Kareem and then Tom and then Tad.
Okay, this is my first recall. Why is it important not to vote for the list of candidates on the second question? Do you want to do some sort of like of a bullet vote? Is that the intent? Thank you.
No, I mean by focusing on question 2, we dilute our attention on question 1. Question 2 becomes irrelevant if we turn out the vote for question 1. We have 10 million Democrats in California, and that's who we're trying to reach, so that if we can get them all turning out to vote on question 1, to vote no on the recall, the opposition will not get 50% plus 1. So that is the strategy. And frankly, the last time we had a recall, and I worked for the governor who was recalled the last time, we had a Democrat on the ballot. It was our then lieutenant governor. And it was a very mixed message about what needed to be done. If you're all in for Gavin Newsom, you do not think about an alternative candidate. You do not think about the whole parade of kind of deplorables that are listed in question 2. It is about preserving the leadership that we have, and we are all in for Gavin Newsom. And if we are, we vote no on question 1, and we're done.
Thank you.
Tom Camarella. Tom Camarella going twice. Tad Daly.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Hello, Betty Yee, and thank you for a stirring presentation. I'm ready to go.
Good.
Betty, I know the temptation is strong to just focus like a laser beam on defeating this recall, and I promise you that I will. Yes. But I want to say to you and all my fellow Culver City Democrats here that I hope the day after, after we have soundly trounced this recall, that we don't just move on and we devote some attention to what an incredibly flawed constitutional provision this is.
Yeah.
I mean, I sort of vaguely understood it before, but I now realize that literally 100 candidates could run on question 2. And the winner of the plurality could get 2 or 3% and become the next governor.
That's right.
I can hardly think of a more undemocratic procedure, constitutional provision than that. And I really just urge us on the day after we trounce this recall to really devote some attention to really seeing if we can get rid of this recall provision altogether in the California Constitution, if we believe in democracy.
Exactly. That's a great point, Tad. I mean, that's when you remember Arnold Schwarzenegger got elected with 30+% of the vote, when he defeated, when the Gray Davis recall was successful. And you're absolutely right. And what I will say, the other thing that's objectionable to me as your controller, writing checks for $271 million to our county elections officials. This is probably the most angry I've been since I've been in this office. The idea that we could have spent that money, helping so many Californians who are struggling right now. But that's what this is costing taxpayers. And you're right, it becomes frivolous at a point if we don't fix this. And this will be the weapon, frankly, that Republicans will keep using until they're successful. So I'm staying optimistic that we're going to beat this back, but I'm with you that this can't keep happening. And it is not a democracy if we allow this kind of tactic to happen. Thank you.
Suzanne DeBenedettis.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say thank you. Second, on KPFK today, they pointed out the same man, I think, who put in $6 million or something to get this recall going is also suing city of LA or something for our main state for not allowing evictions. So again, right. I know our club, we're very serious about housing. So I want to thank you and thank the governor for what he's done, and just say we really have to, pull out all the stops and work with with the state to keep Gavin Newsom in office. So thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. No, yeah, and thank you for bringing that point up because, you know, on every single issue that we care about, you see the opposition, you know, to just the progress we're trying to make here. So appreciate you pointing that out.
Myrna Caton.
Hi, I appreciate your message. It is clean, clear, and simple. However, I have been in groups and spoken to people and read, and there is confusion about just voting against the recall. And scenarios have been brought up, such as if Newsom were only to gain 49% approval, then theoretically, if a Republican candidate came in with, let's say, 20% approval, and that candidate had the highest percentage rating, would that candidate then become governor? So when I was told by some loyal Democrat friend that we need to vote down the recall and vote for a Democratic candidate, but if there are apparently more than one, there's more than one Democratic candidate, then that vote would be diluted, and it would seem as if the party would get behind one of the Democratic candidates, and that would be a backup in case Newsom were to lose. So if you can clear up that confusion, it would help me and a lot of people that I've spoken with.
Sure. So Democrats have a very, very significant voter registration advantage in California. If we let question 1 go down, we've not done our jobs. And everything has to be about turnout for this. And this is going to be true for our 2022 elections, by the way, in terms of winning back the congressional seats, just how we're going to continue to build our majorities. It's always going to be about turnout. But this specific one is about turnout because it's an off-cycle election. It's which generally brings out your loyal Republican voters. This is also an election where timing wise, I mean, we are campaigning and canvassing and phoning during the summer. So to try to reach people, but frankly, I think people are they're starting to get pretty aware. But I'm not campaigning for September 14th. I'm campaigning for the week of August 15th when the ballots are going to arrive in the mail. And so the message has to be return the ballot early. This is a turnout election, plain and simple. And that has to be our message. If we don't get 50% plus 1 on question 1, Democrats will have failed. We have the overwhelming voter registration advantage. And so all we're trying to do as a party is to activate what we know how to do well. And that is the voter outreach, the phoning, the canvassing, as much as we can touch, and hopefully multiple times our Democrats. And frankly, if we turn out our base, we will win. So it is, and I know the nervousness around this, but I also saw what happened at the last recall, which was such a diluted message that it was even more confusing than what we see now. The party has felt that the simple message, and we work with the campaign on this, is to vote no on question 1 and turn in the ballot.
I'm sorry, could you please respond to the scenario questions that I posed?
If that should happen with, if Governor Newsom is defeated on question 1, where the Republicans are able to get 50% plus 1, then whoever has the most votes on question 2 will become our governor. The party is not taking a position on question 2. And this is a decision with the campaign, with the recall campaign.
Thank you.
To us, it is the simplest message because frankly, we don't know a lot about the Democrats who are on the ballot. They have, I don't I frankly don't know what kind of leadership they would bring to California. And you look at where California is now with respect to certainly the COVID crisis and our recovery. I shudder to think what new leadership would mean during this very juncture when we're trying to get our schools reopened, and the governor just announced today, essentially, a vaccine or testing scenario to get our schools fully open. So this is, the kind of leadership we need to continue to count on in terms of moving California forward.
Okay, Ron Ostrand. Ron, are you there? Do you have his hand up? Okay, well.
Second. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, Ron.
Okay, thank you. It's muted for some reason. Well, Ms. Yee is correct. It is absolutely essential that we don't lose this recall election. We have an older senator, and if a Republican governor is in office when she may unfortunately have to retire early, we could end up losing the Senate nationwide. So I'm definitely voting no, and I think it's very important that we get out the vote. I agree. I think there's one way to absolutely assure that we will win this election, and that is for Gavin Newsom to come out against the elimination of R1 zoning. That is the antithesis of getting support in the suburbs. Joe Biden would not have won the election but for the suburbs. We were supposed to discuss this resolution today, but it got continued to come against eliminating R1 zoning. I'd like the Democratic Club to read the book Dark Money by Jane Meyer, which explains the Republicans and the dark money's 40-year strategy to take over state legislatures. The blue state legislature.
Interrupt you, Ron, but is there a question for the vice chair in here?
Yes, why doesn't Gavin Newsom come out against SB 9 and 10? I think he would easily win the recall election if he did.
No, thank you, Ron, for the question. I'm not well-versed on his position on this or his intentions on it. I'm sorry to say, I understand your point, and believe me, I totally understand your point. I do a lot of work in the housing arena myself, so I'm very sanguine about what's required here. One of the things that I am going to say, just in response to your question, the Republicans are doing a pretty good job of painting, what the scenario is if we continue to have, Gavin Newsom as our governor. I think we have to continue to lift up what he's accomplished. This recall proposal as filed did not even mention COVID. I mean, obviously, so this was an attack on all of us in terms of our progressive values. And so I think we have to continue to just, lift up what he has accomplished. Obviously, when he survives this recall, we are going to have this debate. I hope we can have it fairly and squarely so he can take a position on it and understand where we need to go in California around this issue of R1 zoning. And but the focus on the recall right now is, frankly, I'm not giving Republicans the time of day. I'm doing everything to talk about how we turn out our own Democrats. So I'm talking about what he's done for women. I'm talking about what he's done for our communities of color. I'm talking about what he's done for our seniors, what he's done for childcare, what he's done for our schools. And so, oftentimes, people, I think at the end of the day, we know what's at stake. Then when we get to the polls, we have this feeling of, what are we really voting on? What are we voting for? Let's vote for something. And then let's continue the work that has to be done, particularly around housing, which is very, very challenging in California.
Could I follow up?
No, it's already 7:25, but thank you. Okay. I'd like to thank Vice Chair Yee for coming very much. And I'd also like to just clarify that the club has not taken a position on SB 9 or SB 10 or local upzoning measures. So, you know, all opinions expressed are those of the members unless the club, you know, passes a resolution by majority vote.
Sure.
And I understand you have to talk to our friends at Indivisible, so I do not want to keep you any longer, and I really appreciate you coming to visit us.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Culver City Democrats, and really counting on all of us to get out the vote and vote no on this recall. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
right.
now I'll turn the mic over to Mary Ellen Early from the LA County Democratic Party, who will also address the recall.
Thank you, Jeff. I think the thing I want to emphasize the most about this particular election is apathy is our enemy. Governor Newsom will not be on the ballot with a big fat D after his name. So it's up to everyone to understand that he is the Democratic candidate and we must turn out for him. Now, there's a lot of people, a lot of Democrats who don't turn out so much for off-year elections, which this is. They'll turn out for a presidential election. Presidential elections are sexy, but they don't turn out for off-year elections. And our job is to turn them out on September 14th or before. So in order to do that, I want to talk a little bit about the history of getting out the vote. Now, I grew up in Cook County, Illinois. That's the city of Chicago and the nearby suburbs. And one of the things about Cook County is, some of you may recall the 1960 election when Bobby Kennedy was his brother Jack's campaign manager. And Illinois was very slow in returning the vote, and it looked like it was going to be a very close election. So Bobby Kennedy called Mayor Richard J. Daley and said, "Mayor Daley, how many votes you got for us?" And Mayor Daley replied, "How many you need?" So it tells you a little bit about where I come from and the fact that both of my parents were Democratic activists. My mom went out one night after dinner with a clipboard and some papers. And I said, "Where are you going, Mom?" And she said, "I'm going canvassing." I said, "Canvassing? What's that?" She said, "Well, I'm going to go knocking on doors and I'm going to find out who's going to vote for the Democratic ticket." And I said, "Oh, and then what happens?" "Well, I turn in my papers and then the Democratic headquarters will call the people on the list who said they're going to vote for the Democratic ticket." And I said, "Well, what about the people who aren't going to vote?" "Well, they're not going to get a call." Also, my dad was a precinct captain. As a precinct captain, he was also required to be a registrar of voters. And in those days, if you were a registrar of voters, you had to register anyone who requested to be registered. So Dad's MO was, when new people would move into the precinct, he would pay them a visit. "Hi, I'm Jean Early. I'm your neighbor." And he would engage them in conversation. As the result of that conversation, he could figure out whether they were Democrats or not. If he figured they were Democrats, he would pay them a second visit. This time he'd say, "Hi, I'm Jean Early. I'm here to register you to vote." So that's how it was when I left Illinois. I came here in 1972 to attend UCLA, and the very first thing I did was I signed up to volunteer at the Democratic headquarters in Van Nuys. I was living in the Valley, and I'm proud to say I was a bird dog for McGovern. I bet some of you folks who've been around for a while know what that means, because back in those days, there was no postcard registration. You had to be a registrar of voters to register someone to vote, and you had to register anybody who asked. Well, in those days, there were a lot of brand new apartment complexes going up. and they did not have security entrances. So what they would do is they would pair me up with the registrar of voters, send us out to one of these new apartment buildings where they knew everybody had just moved in. And while the registrar of voters waited downstairs in the shrubbery, I would go knocking on doors and saying, "Are there any registered Democrats here?" And if they said, "No, we're Republicans, we'd like to register," I would just say, "Well, welcome to the neighborhood." And then if they were registered Democrats, I would send the registrar of voters up to that apartment to register them. So it was a little more subtle in California, but that's how it was. In the mid-'80s, I became involved with an organization here in the Valley called the Democratic Party of the San Fernando Valley. You might have heard the term DIPSIV, that's their acronym. And in those days, all phone banking was done on landlines, remember? And so if you were going to run a phone bank, there were a couple of options. One would be to find a union hall that had a lot of phones, and in the evening, you could go and use their phones. The other option was we had a friendly law office in the Valley, and after hours, after everybody had gone home, the head of the law firm would let Democrats come in and phone bank there. And at that time, the Democratic Party of the San Fernando Valley had a year-round office in Reseda. One of our members was worked for the phone company. He was a member of Communication Workers of America. Do you know that man crawled under the building to set up phone lines so that they could do phone banking there? Haven't things changed a lot since then? Now, with a smartphone, you can phone bank from your house. They can send the list to your computer. And to me, and you can do it anywhere in the country. Because if you remember, in the old days, long distance calls were very expensive. But if you have a phone, in the last election, I did phone banking to Arizona. I did phone banking for the special election in Georgia. To me, it was a wonderful thing. And so the point I'm making is times have changed. Everyone in the party is going to be asked to step up and do their bit. And in fact, in the California Democratic Party, I understand that every caucus and every standing committee is going to be asked to have a special meeting followed by phone banking. And I got a call or an email yesterday from the Native American caucus, and I'm their parliamentarian. So my reply was, well, are they just going to give you a bunch of random names? Find out if you will be calling other Native Americans, and will you have a special script that will talk about Gavin Newsom's what Gavin Newsom has done for Native Americans? Because to me, with all the money raised, it only seems right that we can target different groups. And I know nobody asked me, but I look at what Joe Biden did during the 2000 election. I was on the steering committee of a nationwide organization called Irish Americans for Biden. So it's really important to target and to make sure that if you're going to do phone banking, are you going to just do generic phone banking? They give you a list of names and a script, or is it really going to be relevant to the people you're calling? Another another question I've always had is, will the lists be purged when people return their ballots? I don't know about you, but I've been involved in a lot of different phone banks where people say, oh my God, if one more group calls me, I'm tired of getting these calls. Now, I understand that the California Democratic Party is going to be working with every county Democratic Party and with organized labor so that hopefully we can avoid some of these things where we annoy people by calling them too often. And like I said, one of those things is I've heard people get really angry. And when I asked that of a representative from the California Democratic Party, she said, yes, they do have the ability to purge the lists of people who have already voted, but it may take up to a week before it really gets done. So those are things we have to consider. Now, I've talked to people who have already started phone banking, and they tell me that there's a lot of education that needs to be done. In other words, people, first of all, have to understand how this special election works. I think Betty Yee described it pretty well. I also think that we should look to revising special elections in the future so that if by some horrible chance the governor gets recalled, the person who replaces the governor is the lieutenant governor, who I understand got a majority of the votes in the last election. To me, that would make more sense than somebody who gets 19 or 20% of the vote in a general election or in a special election. And I never thought Gray Davis would get thrown out of office. I knew Gray, he was my assembly member. And recall elections should be reserved for people who are have just done terrible things. And Gray Davis certainly didn't deserve to be unceremoniously kicked out of office and replaced by Arnold Schwarzenegger. But in the beginning, people thought, oh, he was elected and then reelected. They'll never kick him out. And then along came Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he went on the Oprah Winfrey show and she endorsed him. And then I knew we were in trouble. So it's not enough to say, oh, he's going to win. He won by 62% of the vote in 2018. That doesn't matter. The Republicans are revved up. They cannot win an election fair and square. So what are they going to do? They're going to use this recall to get rid of a governor who's done a great job for us, who has done yeoman's work during a pandemic that I've never seen in my lifetime. And we need to get behind him, but we need to turn out our base, because a lot of Democrats will show up, like I said, for general presidential elections, but we need to have them show up for this particular election. Now, I received some files from the California Democratic Party, talking points in both English and Spanish, and a vote no on the recall social media toolkit, again in both English and Spanish. And I don't know if Jeff has received it, but after this meeting, I can email him the files, and whoever is in charge of getting the vote or doing email blasts for the Culver City Democratic Club can then send them out to people. If you're doing phone banking, like I said, make sure you educate voters on how important it is. Also, I advise you to stick with the script. Calls may be monitored for quality purposes. Have you ever heard that before? And in the chat box, I'm going to put the name and the email address of Andrea Guzman. She is the Southern Organizing Manager for the California Democratic Party. So if you have questions, she would be the best person to answer them. And I'm going to tell you again, remember, apathy is our enemy. And I will be happy to take any questions if I can help. If they're questions I can answer, if they're not, I'll refer you to Andrea.
Thanks, Mary. I wonder, are you, the talking points you're asking about, I got a packet of these Vote 2021 Truth Squad cards from the county.
If you make me a post, I can put them, I can put them up. I have them on Acrobat and you can see what they look like.
Yeah, I do have a couple hundred of these cards. So we can get them out to the members.
Sheet of paper?
It's 3 by 5.
One. Okay.
Anyway, you are
okay.
So please, the screen is yours.
Talking points. Again, it's 2 pages. Apparently I'm having trouble. Oh, here we go. Bringing up the second page. The other one is the social media toolkit. Go on the recall. And again, this was sent to me in both English and Spanish. And you'll notice on page 2, it talks about different issues and what the Republicans would do versus what Governor Newsom would do.
Yeah,
so
that is different from what I have, but we're not seeing your screen.
Turn those off again.
Mary, are you with us?
Okay. Well, what I will do then after the meeting is I will email them to you and you can send them out.
Fantastic.
Would that work?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we're good. Please do send me the file. I can send it around to the members. Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Great. So
I can hear you. Yes.
Great.
And I understand it. Hands up. So
yes. So I'll call on Pete and Myrna, and then if anyone else wants to ask questions in our remaining 17 minutes, go ahead and raise your hands too. Pete Rockwell.
Oh. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I remember the Schwarzenegger Gray Davis thing, and Cruz Bustamante, the lieutenant governor, I believe, was on the ballot in case the recall passed. And I think that was very confusing to people. So I think this is a good way to go. Just say no on the initial question, and we won't ever get to the second question making any difference, because the first question is the only one where a majority rules. Yeah. The second question, it's a plurality, and like they said, it could be 2%, 5% of the vote. It's insane. So we just have to let people know that, and I think a lot of people don't know it. They don't understand how screwed up the rules of this particular election are, and I think we need to be clear about that. And that is the reason we have to concentrate on no on the recall, forget everything else, because everything else is just, it's impossible. Anyway, that's my comment.
I agree. And in fact, Cruz was not the only Democrat. As lieutenant governor, he was probably the most prominent Democrat, but then others started jumping in. And one thing in my part of the county that I will talk about is AD 38. We lost that seat because of the top 2 primary. We had Christy Smith elected in 2018. And then when the person who was elected to the 25th congressional district resigned, she stepped in to run for Congress, which left the 38th AD open. And what happened was something like 5 or 6 Democrats ran and only 2 Republicans. So guess who got into the runoff in November? The 2 Republicans. And that was horrible because that particular AD is kind of a purple AD. And it's now becoming more and more Democratic. So it's really important not for everybody to jump in. And I think that's what happened in the 2003 recall election.
Myrna?
Okay, following up along that line, the phone banking scripts, will that script address this question and the confusion? Because educated voters can, query and say, well, how about this situation? And what if, a Republican gets 20% and so would the phone banking person be equipped with response? That's my first comment. And the other is, will there be postcarding for this recall the way we did such heavy duty, massive postcarding for the presidential election?
Yeah, let me answer your first question or your second question first. Postcarding is going on. I understand the West Side Democratic headquarters and the Santa Monica Democratic Club and the Democratic Party of the San Fernando Valley are doing it. Postcarding will only be good until the vote by mail ballots go out, because people will start returning them. So that has to be done very early on. And I myself, in 2020, I did postcarding to Iowa for Teresa Greenfield. I did postcarding to Arizona. And then I did postcarding to Georgia for the special Senate election on January 5th. And I was given a script. I was given instructions, only use your first name and things like that. I don't know who is preparing the scripts for the California Democratic Party, to tell you the truth, because like I said, I represent the Los Angeles Democratic Party. And I hope that they will take advantage of the fact that we are such a diverse and rich party. We're rich in our diversity, that they will use that, because that's one thing the Biden campaign did, was they had groups of different ethnicities and they were targeting GOTV to their own organizations, their own communities. And I think that worked. But like I said, I don't work for the California Democratic Party. I'm not sure what they're doing, but my feeling is, and I've been emailing back and forth with the chair of the Irish caucus. I'm treasurer of that caucus. And I said, if they want our caucus members to do phone banking, are they going to send us a list of people with Irish surnames and talking points that have to do with Gavin's relationship with the Irish community and his own Irish heritage? And he said, I'm going to ask them, because they haven't gotten around to the Irish American caucus yet. We're a very small caucus, but I think it's really important that each individual community's needs be addressed. And now your first question was phone banking. I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Yes. When you phone bank, you have to be prepared for the person on the other end of the line to ask questions. So, and the script should, have answers as well, as much as they can. But if they were to ask the question about voting for one of the candidates in addition to voting against the recall, Betty Yee said, and you said the same thing, just ignore the bottom half, but that might not satisfy the person's question. The way I had to ask it, other people might ask it of phone bankers.
Right. And I know some of these stop the recall talking points are going to be helpful, but I would just say the Democratic Party has not endorsed any of the candidates in Part 2, and we don't encourage people to even fill out that portion.
I think Betty Yee seemed to say that she doesn't, the party doesn't even know anything about these candidates, and that seemed an interesting response.
They're all allowed to have their political designation after their name, but Gavin is not allowed. And that doesn't seem right at all. Apparently his campaign missed the deadline to put that D after his name. So I would hope everybody would make sure that when you phone bank, you let people know he is the candidate of the Democratic Party. If you don't vote no on the recall, he won't have a chance. He will not be included in the second portion. So we really have to educate people a lot. I don't know if that answers your question, Myrna, but it's a difficult thing.
No, my question was, do the talking points have a response if someone we call said, well, but I understand that we should also vote for a Democratic candidate in case Newsom is recalled, and even though you're not endorsing, Betty Yee said, party doesn't even know anything about these people. So is that the response we should give if we're asked?
Yes, it's true. It's true. Because we don't know, they could be followers of Lyndon LaRouche and have a D after their name, right? We don't want to recommend any of those people that we don't know. There was a case in Illinois in 1986. There were two candidates, one for lieutenant governor and one for secretary of state. One of them had a name like Fairchild, and I forget the other one. And the Democratic Party was so anxious to elect a governor, they never looked up who these people were. And it turned out two LaRouchers, one in the primary, one of them had a name like Fairchild, and a lot of the African-American community thought that was an African-American, and they all voted for Fairchild. So what you had the first time, I guess, in Illinois history where the Illinois Democratic Party said, don't vote for our candidates for lieutenant governor and secretary of state. So just keep that in mind.
So Leah Pressman, the chair of our Politics and Elections Committee, has made arrangements for people to phone bank, and I've secured some of these window signs from the county party, which we can give away for free. There's also a link that Leah has for postcarding thing. She'll talk a little bit more about that after Kimberly gets her question in.
Okay.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for coming. Hi. Is there any thoughts on Gavin coming out to do any, I guess, rallying speeches and get together to, to stop the recall things that are going to be in our neighborhood down here?
You mean in-person meetings?
Something like that. Or a Zoom, even anything that's going to get a bunch of us, fired up, and that he could speak to some, because there are some touchy issues that he still needs to address, which is some of the violence in the sort of East Bay area, and there's concerns about some of these housing issues and how they're going to be dealt with. And I'd like to hear him speak to those points.
Funny you should mention, I attended a Zoom meeting last night. It was sponsored by a group called CAL, Californians for something leadership, effective leadership, something like that. And it was primarily the African-American community. Every single African-American elected official was there. Ooh. And it was a fundraiser. And there were, many levels of sponsorship, but you could come for as little as $25. And Gavin Newsom appeared on Zoom, and he took questions and answers, and a lot of really prominent people in that community, attorneys and people like that, were there. I was very, very impressed by how well they did. So I think I'll tell you, in-person things, that's the sort of thing Trump did, you know, and it's almost like a big COVID thing.
I guess I wanted to see that he gets as much exposure as possible, because the commercials that are just slathering our TV right now, you know, I know we're doing one as well, but I've only seen one. Is there more to come?
Well, I've seen
the Warren one.
one with I'm sorry, with Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, that's the one I see.
Part of that is the teaching she does, explaining, okay, here's how it works. And I think it would be great. I would love to see Bernie do a commercial.
Yeah.
Maybe they're saving him for last. I don't know, but I'm really looking forward to further commercials and further explaining how this is going to work.
Good. Thank you very much.
Gavin is doing. My club, Action Democrats, did a fundraiser on August 1st on Zoom. Our special guest was Representative Adam Schiff, and we presented him with our annual Legislative Achievement Award. And he held it up. Our award is a crystal apple. And he said, it really means a lot to me because my wife's name is Eve, and we're Adam and Eve. And but he took questions and he talked about what's going on in Washington. We had a couple of city council members there, so it worked out well, and we used that to have Andrea Guzman there, and she did a PowerPoint presentation and to tell people, okay, now if you want to get involved, if you want to do phone banking or texting. A lot of people are texting now.
I did that.
They put information in the chat on how to do that.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you all for having me today.
Thank you for coming. So I'm
old friend Tuttle here, and my friend Sarah Roos is here, and Gina Harris. So I'm very happy that you invited me tonight.
Well, thank you for joining us. Feel free to stick around for the business meeting, although I'm sure a bunch of strangers arguing about bylaws amendments. Well, and not
it's exciting if my husband opened the door to my office and he was in his underwear. That's what I always have my hand on the mouse to stop the video if that should happen.
I'm not sure how I feel about hearing that story, but let me turn it over to my partner, Leah Pressman, who will talk about the plans we've made for postcarding and phone banking and window signs.
Thank you, Mary Ellen.
Thank you so much, Mary Ellen.
Thank you all for having me.
So, yeah, this couldn't be more important. We could really